Hi everyone and welcome to Vidori's Compliance Hot Topics. This is Rina Newton and today I'm going to be interviewing Alex Fell, who is Director of the PMCPA in the UK. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Rina. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Maybe for the sake of the global followers, could you maybe explain who the PMCPA are?
Yeah, it's a great point. So we are the Prescriptions Medicines Code of Practice Authority. We are the self-regulatory body for the pharmaceutical industry in the UK. So we kind of effectively are given a license to regulate the industry by the UK government, in this case, the MHRA. We have a role to help embed the code, the ABPI Code, and ensure high standards in the industry. We do that in a number of different ways. We provide training on the code and we provide guidance and try and support companies to implement it. We also operate a complaint system to make sure that any potential breaches of the code are looked into and investigated fully. But I also think there's a real benefit to us being self-regulation because it also helps us understand what's happening in the industry, what are the new areas of activity, where governance and guidance might be required in the future. So we're actually able to collaborate with industry to really understand what's happening and respond accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think it's true to say, isn't it, that a lot of countries look to the UK for how it interprets its own code, which is based on legislation, like you say, because, of course, we publish the cases or you publish the cases on the website.
Yeah, I think that's certainly been clear to me in my 12 months in the role that we operate a very high level of transparency in the UK by publishing very detailed case reports with all of our rulings. And so other countries do look to us and have a number of requests for advice on interpretation of the code, given that the ABPI code is based on the FPA code, so the European code, very closely aligned. So many of the clauses in place in the UK are pretty much the same across all of Europe.
I think that's a message that I'm constantly saying to people is things aren't really that different in Europe because we all have this common theme of the FPA code in all our national country codes. Alex, you mentioned there that you've been in post for only 12 months. Maybe you could talk about some of the highlights from your last year, because I know it's been a really busy year, but maybe just capturing some of those highlights.
It has, and actually it's quite incredible to think it's been 12 months already. It's absolutely flown by. I think the first few months was getting a really good induction and handover with Heather and Etta, who was the former deputy director, and that was invaluable for me. I think when I came in, there were a few priorities that I came in wanting to work on, but also these were priorities for the industry and the PMCPA as well. I think the first would be around social media. So we recognised that there was a need to provide more guidance on social media, on how companies can responsibly use social media, what are the do's and don'ts, how can we support them with guidance. And so the first big initiative we did a few months after coming in was to create guidance on the social media platforms and how to use them. Really kind of happy with how that's gone. We had over, I think, 6,000 downloads of our guidance in the first week, and we had around 2,000 people attend webinars on it. So that shows the need, but it also shows that we've been able to respond.
Yeah, and I think it's really worth reminding people this isn't just for pharma companies. There are so many agencies out there who are genuinely interested in wanting to do the best things for their clients. So I know that we get a lot of questions from agencies in the digital space who also probably download the document. Okay, that's great. What else has been keeping you busy?
So I think having worked previously in very patient-focused companies, I'm also aware of how important it is that the industry can engage and work responsibly with patient organisations. And I saw that as another area where it was really important that we understand the challenges and the barriers to effective collaboration and partnership and be able to respond accordingly. So we actually had a few days earlier this year where we brought around 30 patient organisations together for a workshop on the code, partly training, partly us learning as the PMCPA and the ABPI on how we can better support those collaborations take place. So I'm really happy that that's something we've been able to put time into, but hopefully we'll now see the outputs of that really helping drive the collaboration that we all want to see.
Is that something that's going to be ongoing, this relationship with the patient?
Yeah, I really hope so. I think sort of optimistically we badged the first event as the first annual patient organisation event and hope it will go well. And if there's an appetite, we'd certainly like to continue that. But I think actually now we've heard, we've listened, and it's time to respond. So we're pulling together some fact sheets that I know you've been involved in as well, to try and explain really in plain English some of the clauses in the code and bring them to life. So I think sometimes our terminology can be quite complex if you're not in the industry, and the more we can do to explain things in a very simple, plain English way can only help us.
Okay. And then, I mean, with terminology, I guess you've probably experienced challenges as well in this past year.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I guess there's broader challenges, and then there's things around terminology, just recognizing that we have to do more to explain the different terms in the code and how to use them, but also the implications of things. So, for example, as a PMCPA, I've really tried to encourage companies and people in patient groups to ask us queries. We record those and they form FAQs. I think we've had around 200 or so since I joined. So we have a big bank. A lot of those questions are things like, what does arm's length mean? What's a sponsorship compared to a grant or donation? So it shows that we can still do more to try and explain these things.
Are these questions coming from within the industry, or are you talking about outside
It's
parties?
both. So it's people within the industry, but also people who interact with the industry. So that could be, to your point, it could be the agencies, it could be patient organisation representatives themselves, wanting to make sure that they comply with the code in their activities and wanting to make sure that they understand it. So I think the real positive is that everybody wants to comply with the code. It's now up to us to keep supporting and keep enabling companies to do so.
And I'm guessing you're thinking that all questions are good questions because the people are seeking clarity, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we sort of keep a bank of them, and then we look at them and we use them to update our kind of FAQs on the code, which quite numerous now on the website. But equally, they actually highlighted some areas that we're looking at in the next version of the code as well. So when we get a question that perhaps shows some things a little bit ambiguous, then that's a great thing we'd be able to note and for the next update.
So you're using all the wealth of insight and data that you're getting to sort of give you an idea of what the changes will be. So how about telling us a little bit around the 2024 code? I mean, what are the steps and the processes involved in getting to January, which I think is when we can hope for the new code, and how busy has that been keeping you and your team as well?
Yeah, so it's no surprise and not secret that we're aiming to update the ABPI code at the moment. I think Q1 is the target, hopefully January next year. There's a number of steps, so obviously we need to understand which areas we need to be updated. That's why it's so useful to get the feedback on what's not clear, where regulations moved on, but perhaps more importantly, where the industry's moved on. So I kind of term this update more as modernization than a big overhaul. So actually, we've formed these sort of code working groups where people who work on the code day in, day out have been able to give us feedback around the way the industry is moving, the way that some of the clauses can be updated. And so particularly in the digital space, I think that we want to make sure that the code doesn't stifle innovation. We want to make sure it sets high standards. And so it's up to us to kind of make sure we keep pace with the code, and the industry feedback here is so valuable to helping us do that.
Yeah. Do you think you could maybe give us a little bit of insight into what maybe the key changes are going to be?
I think obviously we're still at an early stage. We haven't even begun the public consultation yet. I think we're looking areas around digital, so particularly around the way that links work and people access things like adverse event reporting statements, prescribing information. Can we be more innovative in the use of QR codes, for example? So that's a good example of where we're looking at modernization. I think, again, we want to make sure that we stay the right side of legislation. The code's based on the law. And we have to make sure that the MHRA are comfortable with us every step of the way, which is something that with team work really hard on that relationship.
And that's all music to my ears, as you can imagine. I know a lot of people know that I am, desperate to seek more clarity, because I think with clarity comes understanding and therefore comes improvement. And we would all like to see a world where actually we are mitigating risk and we're preventing some of these breaches and the complaints that come to the PMCPA too. Is there anything else that you think might be important for the audience to hear about, just either in terms of changes in the PMCPA, I think maybe new staff that you're recruiting or anything else?
Yes, I think this is, undoubtedly a time of change at the PMCPA. We've had a change of leadership, and we're really trying to kind of position ourselves in that dual role of being able to support proactively companies to embed the code at the same time as that complete independence around the way that we enforce it. I think what we have done is we've increased the size of the team since I joined in order to do that. but partly also the number of complaints has increased over the last year, which people will have seen through annual reports. And so really important that we've been able to invest in bringing in more really high quality people to complement the current team, so we can start churning through cases faster. We do have quite bold ambition in this space to be able to get through cases from when they arrive, to be able to deal with them almost immediately, so we can start to see cases dealt with hopefully within 3 months of receiving them. Now, of course, it's a huge variety in the complexity of cases. I think what some people don't realise is that on average in our last annual report, every complaint comprises around 6 separate allegations on average. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a complex role that the panel and the team have to play in assessing them, and they're absolutely committed to making sure they make good decisions every time. So it's not a case of just working faster, because ultimately these are really important decisions for industry, and we have to make sure we do everything we can to get them right first time.
Yeah, yeah. And the team all doing a really hard job with the writing of the new code as well. Okay, thank you so much, Alex, for the honesty and the openness. I think that's quite refreshing to hear. And yeah, onwards and upwards. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, Rina. Good to talk.